Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the third episode of the PopHeadz Podcast with your host, Eric, aka Ghostwriter. Now, my voice is back from having COVID for the last 2-ish weeks. And speaking of COVID, I'm hearing that a lot of people got it after Nft Nyc last week. I want to reiterate the importance of health and hope that everybody and all of our friends recover quickly from that. If my voice still sounds a bit scuffed, it's because of COVID. But push on. So actually, I did want to talk about Nft Nyc a little bit and how it relates to branding. I personally didn't go, but I have been keeping up with all of the cool events I saw people posting about. Again, I didn't experience them firsthand, but I wanted to talk about a few of them after watching some of the events. The first is I wanted to shout out the meetups related to artists like the Masked Warriors and the Kitchen crew, and some of the meetups they went to with Form Function and Exchange Art. If you don't know, our artist Joyce was able to go and shared some photos of all the goings-ons. I think one of the most attractive things about artists and collector communities in Solana is in general how supportive everyone is. If we're talking about community building, some of the friendliest, close-knit communities are art related. It's a little hard to capture that small, tight-knit group feel when you start scaling out and expanding, and it's something that, to be honest, I haven't found the right formula for yet. Very often, something starts off incredible because it's small and everyone in the community gets a lot of one-on-one attention and connection. But inevitably, as the project expands, that feeling is lost. It's something I'm still thinking about and working on as it relates to my work at the kitchen. I think when we started the kitchen, everybody was so hyper enthused about it simply because it was only about like 10-20 people, and we would hang out in Discord VC all the time. Over time it grew to about, I want to say there are about 400-ish people in the Discord. Obviously not all of them are there all the time, but because of the expansion, I feel like a lot of people kind of decided, I what I wanted was that close, tight-knit group feeling. And they decided to just find that somewhere else, and that's not bad per se. It's just how do you make a project go from the first 10 people to 100 to 10,000, and how do you keep that same tight knit group feeling? And I don't think there's a good answer for that yet. Yeah. So with the 10K collection, everyone wants to feel seen, but at the same time, they do expect something bigger for the project. And these days, beyond just the scope of the art, I'm thinking a lot about what it will take to build a PopHeadz community. I want to be able to capture that tight-knit crew vibe, but in a 10K collection, it's probably going to be obscenely hard. Perhaps the way to go is sub-DAOs or something like that. But I've also seen situations where that leads to separation and dissent. If any of the listeners here have any suggestions, feel free to shoot me a DM, as I would love to hear them. Going back to the point about projects getting bigger, I have to give a shout out to what I saw from Doodles. In my opinion, what they showed last week during Nft Nyc was a vision for a brand and future that could genuinely succeed long term, beyond Web3. If you're not familiar, Doodles is a fairly large project that started out on Ethereum with a quirky and charming cartoon-like art style. During Nft Nyc, they really flexed their prowess by having an incredibly themed experience, a keynote which included them revealing that Pharrell would be joining as their brand manager, and hints that their next-gen collection would be on a different blockchain, actually. Rumors say Solana, but could be anything, in my opinion. It would not surprise me to see them have a Doodles L2 or something like that. The last thing I thought was cool about Their experience was their IRL minting machine. It looked like a big generator, a machine with these levers you had to pull and buttons you had to push. It was pretty sick. If we're talking about blending Web3 brands with IRL experiences, I would love to see more of that kind of thing. Now, it certainly had us in the PopHeadz team thinking about what we'd like to see if PopHeadz ever had a booth or designed an IRL experience. It's no shocker that we are going for branding and IP as a major part of our roadmap, and honestly every project is. But I think one thing that can help set us apart is that we can vocalize and visualize what some of our IRL experiences will look like. We haven't really discussed it too much, but now that we've released info and lore about our bombs, we can say that something that we do want to create is kind of a dodgeball experience with them. What form that takes, either a game, a VR experience with haptic sensors, or actual IRL dodgeball, is yet to be finalized, but it is something we hope to see. I'm going to talk a little bit about PopHeadz lore and theming right now, actually. Sorry, excuse me. Again, still have COVID. Fundamentally, PopHeadz is about self-expression and identity. When you see a Pophead, you see a youthful, almost childlike human in a helmet, or with some, fancy fashion and mods. The reason for the youthful appearance is that PopHeadz is actually about youth, optimism, and childlike passions that we so often ignore over time as we grow up. The helmets and customizations are made up of things literally and metaphorically, of recycle or found items and pieces we attribute or identify with ourselves. The bomb motif for PopHeadz is interesting. When thinking about these rebellious youths and them doing whatever they want to do, bombs as weapons actually comes to mind. In the literal sense, yes, they are throwing bombs at each other. They aren't meant to be destructive or used for anarchy. The idea was more like Nintendo video game Splatoon, if anybody knows about that video game. In that game, you have little squid people shooting ink everywhere until pretty much the city that they are in is covered in their colors, in their truths. The bombs are similar to that, metaphorically on two levels. Number one, it's hard to be true to yourself and move away from living a life of apathy. In that case, you sometimes need a bomb or explosion to give you a wake-up call. And number two, sometimes your truth is not heard or understood by others. And in that case, you may need a metaphorical bomb for it to get through to people. Maybe I'm going too deep, but suffice to say, we want to make some kind of dodgeball experience with these things. Okay, switching gears. I want to talk about one last Nft Nyc experience, which is Azuki and their garden and alley experiences. Now, I love the theming. If you aren't familiar with the project, they are an anime/Asian-inspired PFP collection and brand on Ethereum, and arguably the most successful one in that genre. Some people have qualms with the founder's history, and understandably so. I'll leave that to the listener to dig into that themselves if they want, but I'm not going to be talking about that. I want to talk about the Nft Nyc experience they designed for their holders. Now, they had several experiences, and the first being that it looked like they rented out a boba shop where they distributed boba and merch. I was really down for that one. I'm a big boba fan. But their big event was actually a highly decorated experience where they essentially created an Asian themed set that looked something like part of a Genshin map with red lanterns hanging around. I thought it was cool. One criticism I saw was that people were unsure what their main theming was supposed to be, Japanese or Chinese. Seems to be a blend of both. I don't think they have to be tied down to one, but perhaps they do need to think about what themes and motifs appear consistently in their environmental imagery. Obviously, the Tori, or the Japanese shrine gates, is one of their main branding images, which leads you to believe it's mostly Japanese inspired. I think, to be fair, most anime themed projects will honestly have inspirations from many Asian cultures because we're so globalized, and I think it is necessary considering how broadly diverse the cultures that participate in NFTs and Web3 are. If your art has anime or manga influences, it's obvious to say oh, this is Japanese theme or inspired, and that is true in some level of Popheads as well. That being said, in terms of branding and world building, we are leaning towards more Korean influences, considering that Daniel is Korean, which makes sense. Sorry for rambling. Suffice to say, we are currently working on some environments and world building, and we'll think about consistency and next level art direction. When talking about world building and project environment art, it's almost a meme, to have some kind of like, you have your animals together hanging out, drinking or eating, overlooking a sunset or something. I get that. It's meant to be evocative and attractive. I think if NFT projects want to make brands, the world building needs to have some kind of art direction and consistency that is purposeful. That way, when you do have these IRL thematic experiences, they won't seem random. Anyways, what did I want to say regarding all of this? I liked the Nft Experience set design. I sorry, just tangent. They also made a lighter, like a Zippo lighter merch. I thought that was really cool. And then the little beans with the crane game. I do think if we want to take that to the next level, consistency and depth of your world building will be key. I know we hammer on about Web3 and Metaverse all the time, but I think what people truly want will be taking what's there in Web3 and Metaverse and being able to experience some of that in IRL and other experiences and formats. And so obviously world building, consistency, depth of art direction, I think those are all going to be key. Okay, last topic before I sign off. Talking about traits and our floor. We've had a lot of internal discussions about how to make our collection look good. The way we broke things up is within the 10K collection, we have sub-collections. One of the most annoying things is trait mismatch, or like, when you generate the NFT and you just get a big jumbled mess because it just got random traits. What we're doing is not creating a massive global list of traits. Instead, we are breaking them down into sub-collections, where some traits are exclusive to that sub-collection in an effort to make sure that we don't get weird trait jumbles and mismatch. The other thing I wanted to talk about was our floor. I honestly think it's fairly easy to design a collection ceiling, or, its legendaries. You just kind of let your imagination run wild and add cool things. That being said, I think a floor is much harder to design for. When I say floor, I mean commons. I honestly believe that the best project floors are commons that look clean. Clean being fewer traits, attractive PFPs, and not a big jumbled mess of traits. And to that end, that is what our floor, that's what the Popheadz floor and commons are going for. I think originally the plan was for all Popheads to have helmets, but there was something incredibly attractive about Goblin, who has a hat rather than a helm. I'm going to say that a lot of our commons will be put into this helmetless category and focus more on fashion, hairstyles, and hats. I think from an aesthetic perspective, it will look very clean and attractive. And based on personal tastes, I think it will be more popular, actually, than some helm categories. We'll be sneak peeking some of what that looks like this week, actually, for y'all. And really, that's all I had for this week. It was actually a lot of Popheadz information there. It's good to be back. My voice is still recovering, but hopefully next week I can try and bring someone else for an interview. So thank you all for listening, and see you next time.